using arguments, evidence, and reasoning as opposed to maybe just like having faith
I mean, faith
or
would still be
something like that.
evidential, right?
Like,
Like
of
if you
course, those
have
things are.
some belief based on an intuition, the intuition is going to be a form of evidence.
I don't think it's a form of evidence in the way that Ayn Rand is talking about evidence.
What does she mean by evidence?
Well, she doesn't, ever give like a technical definition, but from what I've been able to conjure up, evidence is some fact or reasoning or argument that, would raise the probability of something being true.
Yeah, this includes intuitions then. Intuitions are a fact which raises the probability.
I don't think that intuitions they have a place in raising probability, unless of course the raise probability of is, whether or not you have an intuition, then of course it raises the probability. But if I'm talking
even things
about,
other than that, like
no, I don't think using intuition.
Wait,
or
so if like,
mathematics
can I ask a
want to
question?
talk a little bit more about this thing really quick.
Yeah. Okay.
So in the case of the math, that's like a perfect example of something you do use your intuitions to form, right? You use your intuitions in mathematics all the time. In the case of like picking out which axioms you think are going to accurately capture if it's the case that you're some kind of really like realist on math, which I guess you are.
I'm not a
then
Platonist.
using your say again.
I'm not a Platonist or anything about mathematics.
Well, not Platonist, just like any form of realist. Like you don't have to think that they exist like a classical Platonist view, but just like that you think the mathematical facts correspond to some fact about reality or something.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, so as long as you think they correspond to some fact about reality, then you're going to be fine with using your intuitions to pick out those axioms.
I don't, again, you just keep saying I'll be fine, but.
Well, we can't use it trying to get clear what that even means. So like pivoting back to the term objective is just going to increase in clarity.
Well, look, when we're talking about intuitions, intuitions obviously don't serve as evidence for things that, or how do I explain this properly? So, like, if intuitions, their causal explanation is an emotion you get or feeling you get from, whether or not something is consistent or inconsistent with something you already believe, something like that. The truth maker of a proposition like a moral judgment, or the truth maker of a proposition like I don't know if it's moral or mathematical, one of the two, either two.
Yeah, so there's kind of like two lines on the table here. With the first one, I'll like try to address what you're saying directly. In the case of our intuitions about mathematical facts, they have this linkage to like the mathematical facts that exist in the real world, right? Things being true in the real world end up having like causal impact on the ways our brains form evolutionarily and so on. There's like a deeper explanation, but I think you kind of get the obvious case there. Like obviously mathematical facts are going to be involved in things like physics, and thus they're going to be involved in chemistry, thus biology, thus neurology, thus psychology. So there's a like a causal relation there at least. But on top of that, right, the obvious thing to ask is just, do you think that randomly flipping coins on propositions would not be more inaccurate than just using your intuition? Like if you had to pick one of those two methods, wouldn't the intuitions be more accurate than flipping a coin?
I don't think like simply on the grounds of an intuition for intuition's sake. I don't think the answer is yes. I could obviously imagine that people have some semblance of rational beliefs that they do hold. I don't think there's ever a person I've talked to as like completely utterly
No, I'm not asking that. I'm just asking if you compare the total set of intuitions about propositions, and you compare flipping a coin, which one's more accurate?
But that's the thing, is that given that I think people have rational beliefs to some degree, like it's more expected under that view that intuitions are going to be more likely to be accurate than
so then they are evidence, right?
Flipping a coin. Well, whether or not it's more accurate, like that doesn't mean it's meeting the bar for being considered evidence, right?
It does with your definition.
Well,
you just said it raises the probability of something, right?
I'm not using the word probability in maybe a sense like that. In a sense of like, simply because, statistically it might happen more. I'm not using probability in that way. I'm using probability in the sense that, like, I can establish and ground causal connections to maybe the truth of something that maybe a different word to put this is like intuitions don't have any kind of relevance, and that's to like the truth of the proposition on the table, which is why they don't count as evidence.
Well, that just begs the question, right? Like I think they do have relevance in the sense that I would talk about. Maybe you mean something different by relevance or something, but so long as it's you agree that inductive evidence is a type of evidence?
Yeah, I agree that inductive evidence could be types of evidence, but I'm
Okay,
saying
and
that
since they're
these types of
likely,
intuition, it's the type of proposition is why it bears no relevance. Of course, intuitions can be relevant in terms of determining what you believe and what you think and how you feel about things. Of course, intuitions are evidence in that sense, but like if I just started talking about how many bananas exist in the world, the existence of bananas and how many exist, those types of claims and the truth of those claims are irrelevant to moral truths or mathematical. Maybe that is math, or like a moral
very
truth. For example.
mathematical. There's a
Yeah,
number of
obviously,
bananas.
obviously, yeah. So, but obviously, the bananas don't bear any relevance there, in the moral example. And that's the same thing. Is that intuitions, of course, can tell you what you think. And I will agree. I think you're being more objective when you're using an intuition than using nothing. I guess, sure.
Which would
Um,
mean they're evidence, right? Like you can say they're not like very strong evidence or something, but they're still evidence.
yeah, I guess when I use evidence, I generally mean like good evidence. Like I'm trying to qualify the type of evidence that one should like seek and accept.
In
Um,
which case, intuitions are like in many cases good evidence.
I mean, in like what cases intuitions get? Well, we'll
How
speak
I feel.
like I guess
My intuitions
mathematically.
about how I feel is very good at truth tracking how I feel.
Yeah, no, that's what I said. I agree. In cases in which obviously intuitions can be there's like a causal connection you can draw between intuitions and how you feel, like how your beliefs and your beliefs are I think feelings are cognitive. You feel things because of the beliefs you have, and of course intuitions they have the same origin as these kind of emotions. So of course, I think yeah, of course they serve as good evidence, but when it comes to something like we're gonna speaking morally here, I think simply like if someone told me they think abortion is wrong, and they think abortion is wrong simply because they do not like abortion, I don't think that's good evidence that abortion's wrong.
So for you, what it means to be objective fundamentally hinges on like the threshold of how good the evidence has to be for
Yeah,
it to case as good evidence.
I think you need to yeah, you need to follow these kinds of general epistemic guidelines that you have to look at the full body of evidence in your scope of awareness. You have to, make sure you're not being epistemically negligent. Don't like avoid counter arguments or avoid, considering and thinking through the alternative side. Um, Make sure that your information you're getting is, fact checked or it's reliable or something like that. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely you can definitely declare certain types of beliefs as being formed subjectively. Like if somebody told me like, I'm
And
not
just to
voting
be
for
clear, that
Donald
line
Trump because
on
my pardon.
just to get clear on this, the line that you have on what makes something good evidence versus weak evidence, and thus the line on what makes something objective versus subjective, that's going to be some arbitrary line, right?
I don't know what you mean by arbitrary there. Like there's that
Just
you
in the
could
standard
definitely
sense.
establish like in the sense that there's no motivations for it,
No.
or well, in what sense?
Yeah, like obviously you can be motivated towards something, but I'm saying just that it's like there's not some like fact in the world you're pointing to when you pick out the threshold, other than maybe like your own motivations and beliefs.
I mean, I think there can be. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I don't personally know like specific standard and threshold.
Well,
But I
without
don't
knowing the
think.
threshold, how do you pick the threshold?
Well, again, whether or not I can express, whether or not I can express the threshold, I don't think that makes it any less like. I don't think that makes it any less like, you know, real or anything. I think there's
I
kind
think
of
it
an
gives us
obvious
reason to believe it's
difference.
not.
Maybe it gives you some reason, but I think it's pretty obvious that like if I have a belief that's formed through consulting through like the full context of the arguments and the evidence, that view is obviously more objective than a view that's formed based off of like how it made you feel.
Yeah, I mean the difference there is that in the case of one of these, you're saying it has stronger evidence, but at the end of the day, if all you're saying by like objective and subjective falls on some arbitrary threshold, and by arbitrary there I just mean in the kind of like standard sense somebody would use arbitrary, right? As long as it's formed off some arbitrary threshold, uh, then I mean like it's fine. I'm not gonna have a huge issue with that. It's just kind of like a really strange language usage,
Well, the thing
which is
is
my only point.
this. Well, the thing is this is that when you kind of talk to other people about their belief forming, um, like I guess you could I guess maybe rephrase and say, well, obviously this view that I have is formed more objectively than your view, which yeah, I guess sure true obviously, but the greater idea is maybe like yeah, maybe there's some threshold at which you need to consult things objectively enough to declare it as objective or subjective. Um, the specific line for that, obviously, I don't have a, or not obviously, but I don't have a line drawn. I haven't really thought that out all too much. When I say something is formed subjectively, it's more so just a generalization of like, okay, this approach you gave was not very objective.
It sounds like the line of what makes something objective is highly subjective. Do we have like an argument or evidence that you can use that you would
What
use
do you
to
mean?
support the
What do
line?
you mean by what do you mean by subjective there?
Indexing it to your usage.
I don't know why that's obvious then.
Because I just asked you if you have any kind of like evidence or arguments you can use in favor of it. I'm guessing the answer is like, no. There's like you don't even know how to figure out what the threshold is.
Well, I didn't say I didn't know how to figure it out or that's impossible. I'm just saying that like I haven't done those things. I just haven't thought through the kind of required
Yeah, I'm
conditions
not
of
saying you'll never be
parsing
able
things.
to or something like that. I'm just saying like right now you don't have an answer.
Well, yeah, I haven't thought that through.
No, that's fair. I'm not pressing you on it or something. That's just
That's what
kind
I'm
of like
saying.
one of the hangups for me.
Well, I don't. That's not really that big a like a hang up. I feel like you could most definitely say,
It's a
something
huge
is not
hangup. I have
very
no idea what you
objective.
mean.
I don't know how that's you have no idea what it like mean like, at all.
Yeah, I have no idea what you mean by the threshold because you're trying to index it to something that you're saying is like very real and there's like a very objective methodology for figuring it out, but you can't describe it to me.
Well, look, when you obviously understand the difference between something being objective and subjective, like
On my
the
usage, yeah,
baseline. I mean, is your usage relevantly different than my usage?
almost certainly.
In what way do you use the word objective?
The way that I use the word objective, so depending on the context, I'll either just use it to be like objective means mind independent, or in like an epistemic concept, if I'm saying somebody is like somebody's being objective, the kind of way I'm using it there is a more colloquial sense, and the way that I'd be using it there is just that if somebody's being objective, epistemically, what that means is that the individual is doing a good job at using the right true belief gaining strategies.
I'm confused at how that's relevantly different than what I'm saying, because when I
Well, because
describe the
that one's a very
method for
arbitrary
forming the
threshold,
belief.
and you're saying yours is very non-arbitrary. It's like something external to you.
Well, oh, sorry, the difference. Well, sorry, you said you were using it differently. Now you're trying to tell me that maybe it has different features, like one's arbitrary and one's not.
That would mean I am using it differently.
Okay, the meaning's the same though.
No. No, mine
I,
is knowingly arbitrary. You're
that's
saying
the
you've indexed your, at least if you're being honest with me, then it's not the case that the meaning's the same.
well. I mean, I okay. So I mean, I can go through the whether or not it's arbitrary or not, but I'm trying to clarify the meaning of the word prior to us saying whether or not the meaning is arbitrary. Like yeah, that's I think the way you
Well,
described
I'll tell you
objectivity
my
is what I'm
threshold based off
describing.
my feelings, and your threshold isn't based off my feelings.
Okay, so you agree that they mean the same. It's just the difference is you think that the threshold is arbitrary, and I don't, right?
No, I just told you over and over again they don't mean the same. Mine means a thing that includes that threshold. Yours doesn't.
I'm, I don't know why this is. Is it? I don't know if this is like okay. So I said that being objective means that your belief was formed like by adhering to the evidence, the reasoning, and all this stuff. Those are obviously that means the same thing as like a reliable truth forming like method, right? It's the same thing you described. I'm just laying out the
No,
conditions for
that's
what
not what I
it is that you're thinking.
described. I said they did it in a good
What?
way.
That's
Like,
what
in
I
by
do.
good there, I'm just indexing it to my own, like my own arbitrary threshold that I have in my head based on my feelings. Your
Well, by
threshold's not
good.
based on your feelings. In
Oh
fact, you're
well,
saying it's not based on my feelings or your feelings. You're
obviously,
saying it's based on
obviously the
something external
standard.
to you. And you
Well,
have no
obviously
idea
the
how to even
standard
describe that
for
methodology for figuring out what the threshold is.
obviously the standard for a good. Okay, I didn't think that was the hang up. I thought the hang up was whether or not someone was, really being objective according to like how well they follow the principles. But if you're talking about like, what it means to be good, generally like the principles themselves, then no, of course those could be established. Yeah, like evidence, consulting evidence and reasoning and logic and facts. Um, the obvious reason as to why those things are objective is because when you say adhering to reality, those things are obviously facts reality, but reasoning in this kind of non-contradictory art of thinking of things is the way that reality is, and so it's the method you would have to use if you wanted to adhere to being aware of it. Like I can't start accepting contradictions and expect to know about reality if reality is non-contradictory.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, but I don't see how it's responsive. What I'm telling you is that our
Because it's
definitions are
not
certainly
arbitrary.
different. Yeah, that would mean our definitions are certainly different.
Maybe it relevantly is now, but then the clear difference is that now that I thought the hang up earlier was whether or not you could say that this person's being objective depending on how well they follow these kinds of principles. But if you're calling into question the arbitrariness of the principles themselves, then no, there are reasonings why those
No,
things
the
are.
principles are not what's arbitrary. The threshold of how well they have to follow it is arbitrary in my brain for what I'm talking about when they're being objective.
So you agree? It seems like you agreed with the principles then, no? Like just you disagree with the application and whether or not the threshold is arbitrary.
No, I'm not saying I disagree with that. I'm not saying I disagree that your threshold is arbitrary and non-arbitrary. I'm telling you, if it's the case that your definition is non-arbitrary, then our definitions are certainly different, which is why I have to investigate it. That's why you asked me if it was the case that our
Well, I'm trying to
definitions were different, then
clarify.
asked me for my definition, right? The reason that I
I'm
told
trying
you
to.
my definition was because I wanted you to see that our definitions are certainly different. Now you do see they're certainly different, which brings us back to I'm still curious about what methodology you use to figure out the threshold, and that's why it
But
actually
look,
is a big issue.
I have
And
to
currently, you said you
clarify
don't
what
have a method for
exactly is
doing that, and
different.
that's fine.
Well, I have to
The
clarify what's different here because
I've
we
told you
can
several times,
dissect.
one of
We
us has a
no, well, it's
threshold,
not actually clear.
and one of us has a different
It's not
threshold.
actually clear. Well, this is another aspect of being objective is understanding the context and the full context of the disagreement. Like, it seems like you are agreeing or you've agreed with the principles, which govern objectivity. You just disagree on the threshold and applying the principles. Yes.
No, you're an objectivist, so we're almost certainly using the same words to mean different things there as well. But your definition for what you mean there by objective, the definition for objective relies on the threshold for you, and it relies on a threshold for me. And my threshold is based on my own
No,
feelings,
but
and your
I,
threshold you're saying is totally not based on your own feelings. And so I'm asking you,
I'm
okay,
telling you,
not
maybe we
based on
do
your own
disagree on
not based
the.
on your own feelings.
This
What
is
do
a
you
verbal
base it
dispute.
off of? What is the methodology
This
for
is like
finding it? And you told me you couldn't find it, and that's fine.
this is definitely a verbal dispute because look, I'm telling you
I
that
know.
I know that's the thing is that I don't know why I think I like accurately portrayed this point. I don't know why we're disagreeing because you agree with the types of things that are good belief forming methods like looking at evidence and looking at facts and looking at arguments and being logical and all these different things. Obviously you accept all those things as being constitutive of what it means to be objective, but you disagree maybe on what the threshold is and their application in order to judge someone as being objective. Yes. So we're agreeing in principle, we're just disagreeing in application. And we
No, your
disagree maybe because it's
definition
arbitrary.
of your definition of objective also includes the threshold. It doesn't just include all these principles about what the good strategies are.
So we agree on the principles, but not the application.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, well, actually, I'm not even sure
Okay,
if we
that's
do
what
agree
I
on the
thought.
principles. We at least look to agree on the principles, right? You're almost certainly
Yeah,
using the words in a different way than I am because you're an objectivist.
maybe like slightly differently. I think we have the same sense though.
Good word.
Bigger point though is that so you're saying that the threshold at which we could identify somebody as being objective or subjective is arbitrary under my view. Is that what you're saying? Or it is arbitrary, just factually?
No, I've told you several times that I have no idea if it's arbitrary or not. I'm not even sure what methodology you use for figuring out what the threshold is. And you said
Well,
you didn't
yeah,
know a
I
way
mean,
to
I
really
just
explain
look
it because you
at
haven't delved into it yet.
well, of course, when I look at people and I judge them as objective, I judge them as objective based on whether or not they're adhering to the principles, and I see examples of well, in this line of thought they are being objective, but maybe in this line of thought they aren't.
You also care how much they're adhering to the principles.
Yeah, by how much I'm talking about whether or not in the context of their beliefs, this belief is formed rationally, this one isn't, or whether or not they did their due diligence, or how much due diligence they did, stuff like that.
Yeah, how much? And I don't know how much is enough.
How much to declare it being objective?
Yep.
Sure. I mean, we could just draw these kinds of lines where we say that if you're, give me a second, we could just draw these lines where we kind of apply probabilistic and certain language here. So, if in the full context of their belief forming methods, they're being objective, then we could say that they're certainly objective. And if they're not doing that within the full context, we can say that they're probably being objective or they're probably not being objective. Like you can make these kind of judgments. I don't
Yeah, that's still.
necessarily need a.
Are you saying just that it is kind of arbitrary and you're just slicing up the language this way?
Sorry, say that again.
Are you now saying it is arbitrary and this is how you can slice up the language by just saying they're probably objective or they're being certainly objective?
And I don't know how is that arbitrary? Like I don't understand what you mean there.
Because I
Like
don't know what your
obviously
threshold.
there are
I still
reasoning.
don't know what your thresholds are, right? Probably and like certainty. Like you can say something like, "Well, look, it's like a continuum fallacy to like ask me for the exact threshold," but I'm not asking for the exact threshold. Just what's the methodology you even use to figure out what the threshold is? What methodology do you use to figure
I
out
don't
where you draw
know.
the lines at? Is it
I
just
don't
I don't
know
know,
if
I just
this
feel
is
it out,
like.
or is it
I
something else?
don't think this is. I don't think this is me communicating this concept poorly here. Like whenever we
Definitely
judge
is. It's you
whether
ignoring the question over and over again.
well, it's not because I've already kind of drawn it. Like, if I look at somebody, we have these principles which define whether or not the behavior is objective or subjective, and so we have these types of behaviors where adhering to the facts is objective. Okay, being
Mm-hmm.
non-contradictory is being objective. Looking at the full context of evidence is being objective, and so we have these instances of behavior, and then we look at the way that somebody forms their
Yeah,
beliefs,
those are all
and then
examples
we
of
can
things that are
see.
objective. Those aren't your definition.
Sorry, that I'm telling you that these kinds of well, the principle again for being objective is adhering to the facts, and I'm giving you a list of things which constitute, you know, kind of epistemic virtues in terms of
It's
being objective.
adhering to the facts? That wasn't what your definition was, but that's fine. We can move to this one. You're objective if you adhere to the facts, right?
Yeah, your belief is objective if your belief was formed by adhering to the facts.
Okay. What does it mean to adhere to the facts?
I gave you a constitutive list of things of what it means to adhere to the facts.
Is that a comprehensive list?
Like every single thing you can do. No, I'm just giving you like the bare bones, like general.
Yeah, I'm just asking
I'm
for a
giving you the
definition.
spirit. Yeah, I don't know why this is like so difficult. Like I've kind of told you all these different procedures which are objective. And
Dog,
how
this
they
is
fall into
unironically
the
objective as
thing.
brain rot. You can't use words in a
No,
wildly proprietary way and then be upset that other people don't understand what you mean.
it's not proprietary. I think it's
It
quite
is
obvious
certainly
what I mean.
proprietary. It's not what
Whenever
Moses.
somebody's
Look,
when everybody
you do
when
not.
people
You
say
agree
they're
that
being
she does
objective,
not
they mean
use the
that.
language in the way that's normally used by either the
I
folk
don't
or the
think that.
philosophers. Agreed.
I don't think that's true either. No, I don't agree.
What?
I
You
think
think it is the
interpretation.
case? The
I
philosophers
think
use the language the way she does. You
again,
even agreed with this
you're
earlier.
overgeneralizing now again. Like I'm telling you right now that it's obvious that when Ayn Rand is talking about someone being objective or their beliefs being objective or subjective, they're talking about whether or not that person their belief was formed using the evidence and the reasoning and the logic. And those things are objective. Those things constitute being objective because those things adhere your mind to the facts.
Some of the evidence and reasoning and logic, all of the evidence and reasoning and logic, or some specific portion of the evidence, the reasoning and the logic.
Again, these are just like these kind
Which
of
answer is it?
issues.
Which answer is it?
I've already explained this.
What's the answer? If you've already explained it, just
told
repeat your
you-
answer.
I've told you that being objective, of course, is in the most certain sense, in the fullest sense. Let's say certain. In the fullest sense is following all those principles unabridgedly, right? Like you're doing all those things to the best the best of your ability or something like that. But the application and judgment of someone's belief or a certain type of notion they have as being objective or subjective, those types of issues you can just judge by using those principles and seeing how much they par up to being consistent with those principles. And so if somebody is like mainly doing those things, you could say, oh, that person is mostly being objective or is probably being objective.
So what was your answer to my question?
I told you that to be objective in the most like full sense is to do all those things.
To be objective in the most full sense, it is. I'm just asking you what it means to be objective, like in all the sense you use it to mean the epistemic context.
The broadest.
Or
sense
do
of the
you have
word
multiple
objective is
senses here?
Well, look, the broadest sense of the word objective is to adhere to the facts. But of course, you can be objective in different degrees, which is why I said that somebody who's obviously
Yeah, I know you can be objective in different degrees. Right. But when you say somebody is objective, is that based on some threshold you kind of just feel out like I do? Or is it based on some objective threshold which exists independently? That was look, go ahead and answer the question, please.
I told you, when I identify somebody as thinking objectively here, I'm identifying them as somebody who forms their beliefs on the basis of, exclusively the facts and the evidence and whatnot.
Okay. Exclusively the facts and the evidence. This is a new definition. This is the third time you've come up with a new one. This one is not
a new definition.
I'll explain. Excuse me. I'm telling you why it's a new definition.
I already said that.
No, you didn't. You didn't say exclusively.
I did.
You didn't say exclusively.
It's implied
because
that
in which case
is exclusive.
In which case, it would be the case that you having an intuition and then using that intuition as a fact to then update your hypothesis would be exclusively, if you only use that intuition, you would be exclusively using facts.
I don't know if this is like, I don't know, maybe this is a tracking error, or maybe I.
Yeah, you're having a big tracking error right now because you didn't answer. You're not like engaging with the point at all. You're just fucking running away from it again.
I've engaged with the point and it's not running. I think you've actually kind of misinterpreted this conversation a couple times. And here's another example. Oh hell no, get this guy. Here's another example, right? Like, whenever I'm identifying somebody as
look, the awful part of this tracking error right now is that I just said something and you seem to have no idea what the fuck I said because you're not even responding to it.
I'm sorry. Yahuki just came in here. I had to mute that guy like locally, but
look, that's fine. I'll repeat it then.
The point
I can kick him. Who is it?
About utilizing it's fine. They're muted now. The point that you made about utilizing intuitions as evidence. I'm telling you that if I'm consulting my moral beliefs and I start or if I'm thinking about my moral beliefs and then I start consulting the facts about how many bananas there are. Maybe I am looking at a fact, but that fact isn't relevant to the truth of the proposition, right? And what would be required.
But I'm exclusively looking at facts, aren't I? Am I exclusively looking at facts?
Okay, now we're dropping context. This is another reason why you're not tracking.
I'm not dropping context. This is a yes or no.
It's obviously dropping context. What do you mean?
Can you just answer the question?
I told you you're dropping context. That's the issue.
That doesn't answer my question. You're retarded. Question's a yes or no question.
I have to answer.
Are they or are they not exclusively looking at the facts?
This is obviously like, come on. The context dropping here is. It is.
Just answer. What are you doing?
I'm not answering this question because you're dropping context, and the question is arising in an error on your end in the conversation. Like
Dog, the
when I
error's
say
on
that the
your end. I
belief
told you you've been
no, it's not. I
redefining the
told you
same
why.
word 3 times in
I
a row
told you
because
why.
in
I told you.
typical fucking
No, it's
objectivist
not.
Well,
fashion,
the
you have to
error's on
keep
your end.
That's also
equivocating.
not true.
You
It's
have to
definitely
keep
on your end.
fucking pivoting from point to point to point
That's
instead of
not
just
true.
engaging with the argument.
That's not
I'm
true.
asking you a
That's not
simple,
true
direct yes
either.
or no
That's
question.
not
You can't
true
answer it.
either. That's not true. That's not
I'm
true either.
asking yes or no
Again, I've
question.
told
You
you.
can't
I've
answer
told
it.
you.
Synth, you aren't
I've
answering
told you yet
anything.
again.
What have I
I
not
just
answered,
want to
Space
clarify
Booties?
it. It's fine. It doesn't matter. Since you don't gotta pipe up. Look, the point is this: is that like when we're talking about being objective, I'm actually being very clear and I'm being very charitable. I'm trying to use like no rhetoric at all, so the substance of the point is not being lost here. And what seems to keep happening is as soon as you kind of maybe see an opportunity to rhetorically do something, you just kind of derail
Dog,
the
you're currently doing
substance of the
rhetoric. What you're
conversation.
doing right now is being
No,
rhetorical.
I'm not. The reason
Yeah, you're
why
not
I'm
engaging with the fucking
explaining
point.
the reason why I'm explaining the meta is because it's relevant to reorient back to what I've actually said, because you're gonna keep misrepresenting what I've said, lost in the rhetoric. And
Dog,
I'm
I'm
trying to
not
tell you.
misrepresenting what you said. You
I
said
told you
a
why.
new
And I told you
definition. I
why.
told you
Now
why it
you're
was a
doing it
new
again.
one. You
I'm
said it
fine.
wasn't a new
You're
one.
doing this again. You're doing exactly what I explained. You just interrupted me so you can make some kind of rhetoric standstill, and I'm telling
It's not a
you.
rhetoric
You keep
standstill.
yes,
You
it
are at
is.
a standstill.
Because you
Engage with my
continue to
point.
drop the context. You continue to drop the context. And
Engage with the point.
I am. You're actively choosing not to, and you
Really?
just kind
What
of
was my point?
the point that you tried making is that under the definition that I gave you of objective, meaning adhering to the facts, that using intuition to form some type of belief
No.
is a fact, and therefore it's subjective.
No.
That is your point. That's exactly what you
No.
said.
Your
exactly
new
what you said.
definition was exclusively the facts.
Oh my god.
With
this is exactly what you just-
exclusively, stop. With
This
the
is a
phrase
troll.
exclusive, you're genuinely
Alright, this is a
retarded,
troll.
Divinity. This is so sad.
This is no genuinely retarded.
Exclusively
Like,
the
you
facts
obviously dropped the
is
ball.
what you
lost it.
said. What are you doing? Just engage. You can engage with this point after you hear it,
I've
right?
already
You
explained
forgot
this
what
to
the point was
You've
and
heard
zoom
this
back to an
point.
earlier point. I'm
I just
explaining it to you right
explained the
now.
point. I
No, you
explained the
didn't.
point.
I'm explaining
Yes,
why you
I
were
did.
wrong. I'm
I
explaining
just
why you were
explained the
wrong.
point.
I'm
I just
explaining why you were
explained the
wrong.
Sure, you're gonna
So
explain
stop
exactly
talking.
what I just explained. I
No.
just explained this.
No.
I did. I just explained
No.
this. I did
No,
just
you-
explain this.
Why are you continuously talking instead of letting me explain
Because
to
I
you why
just
you're
explained
wrong?
this. Sure, go for
No,
it.
really?
I just explained this.
Okay, look, I'm gonna go ahead and explain it to you, and don't interrupt. And then if I just
Exactly
explain the
like I
same thing
explained
that
it.
you did,
For it.
I'll look really dumb, right? So just shut the
Yep.
fuck up, right? You have nothing to worry
Yeah,
about.
go for it, bro. Go for
You
it.
just said adhering, right? I'm not talking about that one. That was your second definition. Your third definition was the one where it was exclusively to the facts. This is now a new thing. It's a new definition. You could be adhering to the facts, as in adhering mostly or partially, or adhering all the way to the facts. There's a lot of ambiguity there. And those are all ways you could be using that. But if you say adhering exclusively to the facts, that's a different definition. And now the issue is I can come up with examples where people are adhering exclusively to facts, i.e., there's no other thing they're adhering to, but you're not going to call them objective. This is a simple and direct point. You're just too retarded to engage with it because you care more about equivocating than you care about engaging.
All right, all that talk just to not address what I said. And so the obvious issue with your analysis.
I addressed what you said directly. You said what you
No,
tried
it
to.
wasn't. What was-
Yeah,
what
you
was
tried to
my
portray
response?
my point. You tried to portray my point. That
What
was
was
what
my
you said, and then I told you how you were wrong about that.
What was my response?
I just told you.
said a specific phrase. No, I said there was.
You
an
tried to
issue
portray my
with the way
point.
you interpret it. What was the issue that I said you had in your explanation?
You said I'm dropping context. I understand your
Right.
point. You're not
In what
listening to
way-
mine.
In what way? In what way do you think I said that? Why do you think I said you're dropping context?
With your
What
mouth?
context do
You mean
think
in
you
what
dropped?
way? Are you retarded? With your mouth.
Now you're trying to do this thing where you don't address the substance of the point. You do
I've
exactly
addressed
what I
it
said you
directly.
would.
You are now trying
No,
to
you
quiz
haven't.
me on what you said
I've told
because
you.
you realized your gotcha failed. So
Well,
answer
now
my
you're
question
trying-
now.
there's
Engage
no-
with my
gotcha
point.
didn't fail. Again, I'm telling you that.
Look, answer this with a direct
the
yes or no,
context-
Divinity.
Now you
Is
interrupt
it
me
the
yet
case?
again.
Oh, no, go ahead.
You need to calm down.
Go ahead.
Who is okay? Be quiet. Look, this happens every.
Bro,
day.
I'm trying to mod because you guys are
It's fine.
yelling
You
over
don't
each
need
other.
to mod. You don't need so much. You can be quiet.
Bro,
All right.
come on.
Look, the point is this: that when we're talking about objectivity and subjectivity, of course, when I'm giving you in what sense I'm using the word objective, when I give you its distinguishing unique characteristic, it's implied that objectivity is like exclusively that kind of behavior, as opposed to the alternative that we're discussing. The like exclusivity of the essential characteristics of objectivity is implied.
Yeah, you're
but
not tracking.
the more important part about you dropping context is that I already explained this idea of relevance in regard to adhering to the facts, because when I explained, consulting bananas for your moral beliefs, bananas are a fact, right? But bananas aren't, facts that are relevant in regard to the moral domain. So these kinds of things, they don't qualify as the kind of relevant facts that objectivity requires, which is why, I give you this broad understanding of objectivity, and then we get into more specific beliefs like, moral beliefs or mathematical beliefs, the types of facts that qualify as, candidates for you being objective. If you form your beliefs on them, they become more narrow because of the context, which is obviously the issue you made there.
Look, you're genuinely being retarded, and I think you'll understand that if you just listen, right? For just a second.
Why
here's the kill
hold on?
yourself
Why
space
do you
booty.
keep
Kill yourself
using the
space
word
booty.
retarded?
Shut up,
Why do you
retard.
keep
Shut
using
up, retard.
Fine. It's just
Shut up.
they're just trying to rhetoric. It's fine.
The space booty is just like fagging out and tarding out. It's all gets crazy over here. But look, Divinity. Look, if you say the definition is exclusively pertaining to the facts, then I can come up with a case where it exclusively pertains to the facts, and yet you will not call it objective. I'm not talking about a case where you're a case that would have been included under your previous definition, but now gets excluded. I'm talking about one that you wouldn't want to include on this definition, but that does get included in this definition. So, for example, if a person only uses their intuition, because the intuition is relevant, we agreed this earlier, right? The intuition is relevant. If they exclusively use their intuition to come to a judgment, you're saying that is a non-objective judgment. And yet, you also agree that it exclusively pertains to the facts. And I'm going to ask you a direct yes or no question for hopes you'll answer it. Do you agree if somebody just uses their intuition and they calculate nothing else, then the only thing that they've used has been a fact?
I agree that intuitions are facts. I agree. The problem here with this kind of, reductive, maybe you're trying to show under my
That's
view
not
is
the
that
question I asked.
you're dropping. Yeah,
I asked if they're
just fucking
exclusively using
answered
facts.
exactly. Yeah, they're exclusively using the fact of intuition. I agree.
Are they
but
being objective?
No, if you
So,
let me continue to explain.
then your definition doesn't comply
I don't
with
know
usage.
why. I think everyone here who's listened to me explain this understands the issue that you made and why you're not addressing what I'm saying. Because look, the types of judgments
Point out
that you
one
make,
person who you think will explain the
I've
issue.
explained.
Let's
Oh my God,
try it.
I'm not gonna try to obfuscate to this kind of point. Look, the type of judgment that you make has specific demands for the type of facts that are relevant to establishing the proposition. And so, of course, if we just leave unspecified the judgment
Intuitions
being
are
made
relevant.
in regard to what kind of beliefs, right? Of course, in regard to the beliefs
All of
about
them.
what I feel
All
and
of
what
them.
I think. Of course, intuitions count as facts that actually irrelevant in this sense. But if I just talk about bananas when talking about moral beliefs, bananas obviously aren't relevant here, and so we couldn't say that I'm being objective when I start consulting the bananas. 'cause
Well,
it's
look, there are
irrelevant.
ways in which bananas are going to be relevant to moral beliefs. I think you're just like not you're. This isn't even an issue. I understand your. Excuse me.
Okay,
I'm not trolling. I'll explain it to you. Look,
Let's go on.
yeah, look. Hold on. This actually is an issue for your worldview. Like, it's genuinely bad for you. There is a. Have you ever heard of the green shoes thing in Bayesian reasoning? Like the black crows and green shoes example, the black swans and green shoes.
Just explain to me how bananas are relevant in moral reasoning.
I'm asking you, have you heard about this thing?
I just
Yes
want
or
you
no?
to explain it to me.
Yeah,
That's what you
I
want
would
to do.
love that. I just need to know if how much detail I need to
just explain whatever
explain
you want.
or what I can skip over.
Go in as much detail.
Perfect. Okay, so it's very, very counterintuitive, but every single time that you see a green shoe, that actually gives you evidence that all swans are black. It's very strange the way it does, but it does give you evidence that all swans are black. So isolating things into different kinds of like fields of like this is relevant to this is relevant to this, doesn't actually work in reality, and here's why. If it's the case that you're saying all swans are black, another way you could say that is if something is a swan, then it is black. And so every single time that you see a green thing, if that thing is green, then it is not a swan. That's also true. That follows from if everything that you if it's a swan, then it's black. That also means that if it's not black, then it's not a swan. So if P then Q means that if not Q, then not P.
Okay, I understand. I guess I don't necessarily understand the relevance of the point you're making because
I'll tie it in then. I'll tie it in to help you out because I don't want you to be like unclear on this. The point is things that do not seem otherwise relevant to morals are still relevant to morals. In that if somebody says something like, let's imagine something like if an action is moral, then it's a utilitarian action, right? For everything that you see, right, on that hypothesis, for everything that you see that's not a utilitarian action, that's something that must not be moral. And so seeing a banana, since that's not a utilitarian action, it's expected that that banana will not be moral, right? It's not the case that banana is a moral kind of thing. You can say it's a category error or something, but I'm just saying by not moral, I don't mean immoral. I literally just mean it's not the case it's moral. So a banana is not the kind of thing that can even be moral. And so every banana you see is evidence in favor of that earlier hypothesis. It's weak evidence, but it's relevant and it's evidence.
Okay, I think maybe that explanation kind of makes it useless to the point you were trying to make earlier because obviously I'm gonna agree with like the contrapositives of theories that I accept or moral theories that I accept. Like, yeah, of course I'm gonna accept those, but the kind of contrapositives you can draw from a theory doesn't. Those kinds of that's not relevant for establishing the truth of the proposition.
Yeah, of course it is. What?
No, it's not. I don't have to investigate contrapositives to establish the truth of the
You don't
proposition.
have to,
Unless, of
but you
course,
can do it, and thus they are relevant. There's
unless,
the
of course,
idea that like,
look, this is-
okay, you go
Look,
ahead, go ahead.
If I have a look, if I'm obviously in the kind of experiment you did there, like this pointing out a contrapositive, assuming the moral theory is true. If the conclusion there is just like, oh, here's like a consistent conclusion that can be inferred from my moral view, that's not, evidence of the moral view. Now, maybe if you're making some argument about, the kind of contrapositives of something you think is true and how it maybe contradict or take down a competing moral theory or something. Yeah, maybe you can, take those as evidence. But the actual relevant thing here is this, that, bananas, by themselves, obviously in the way we stipulated the example, those aren't relevant to kind of forming moral beliefs. Now, maybe you might have beliefs about
Your notion of
bananas.
relevance hinges on a threshold again. And you think these thresholds are not the kind of
Well, hold
thing
on.
that are just
Let's go
subjective to
back to
you.
this. I just want to. We can clarify this point of the banana thing. Go back to the threshold stuff. But the point is that, the example you gave me, that doesn't. It's of course obvious that I can't start consulting bananas for moral beliefs.
If you ever found a banana and the banana was moral, you would have consulted something for a moral belief.
Yeah, but bananas aren't moral, right?
That's great. Yeah, that's why it's the case. Look, you said the
Yeah,
contrapositives aren't relevant. You're not tracking right now, right? If the
Relevant to establish
contrapositive,
the truth.
they
of the
are
proposition.
directly relevant to establish the truth of a conditional proposition. Yes,
No,
they
they're
are.
not. Like,
Here is why. If a contrapositive is false, must it be the case the initial conditional was false?
look, I'm not.
Yes or no?
Sure.
Yes. And if the
Look, the
contrapositive
point-
is true,
that's not
must
the
it be the
point.
case the initial proposition was true?
Yeah, look, that's.
Yeah,
I'm
so then
agreeing
they're
with all this. You
obviously
don't have to
fucking
go-
relevant.
No, no, they're
They're
not.
not only are they relevant, they are the same fucking claim.
I've already explained to you how this isn't relevant.
Do you think there's any condition in which a conditional can be
started
true,
asking me
but the
about-
contrapositive isn't also
Oh my
true, or
God.
vice versa?
This is just, again, you're just trying to appeal to this usage of relevance that's obviously different in the context of the conversation.
No matter what context you're possibly
Yes,
using
it
relevance in, the claim itself is relevant to
I've
the
already
claim
explained
itself,
this is
isn't it?
relevant. Relevant by what standard? Not in this context, no.
Is P not relevant to P?
This is ridiculous.
Yes or no?
What usage of the word relevance?
The one you're
'Cause if
using.
if you're
Yes or no?
Of course not. Of course not.
No! That's deranged. Holy shit.
Like, everyone here just heard you, like, obviously drop the context on this point. I don't know why we're trying to.
How did I drop the
appeal to-
context?
I said something insane. Because the context of relevance that I'm talking about is, whether or not the type of evidence is, even fits into the category of being able to establish the truth of the proposition. Like, if I'm talking about whether or not something promotes utility, and I start consulting, how many galaxies there are, and, these kinds of galaxies, they're not making a statement or, serving as any evidence as to.
You Divinity, are you
Yeah,
just saying
they're
they're not
relevant.
epistemically relevant?
Yeah, that's obviously what I was saying.
Okay,
Yeah,
like
then
so, like you're
obviously
basically saying that like the same conditional for like utilitarianism could be applied to like some deontological framework or some other normative ethical
Well, I'm not-
framework, and it will be the case that
I'm
I don't
not,
think
the
it's
I'm
same
not
that.
phrasing it
conditional
like
which
that.
applies to
I'm not
utilitarianism.
phrasing it all like that. I'm not phrasing it like that. The point that I'm
Well,
making
that
is that
would actually help your case,
truth
by the way.
of
I'm
the
just trying to clarify.
no, I'm sure maybe it does, but the point that I'm making is not that point. Maybe that point is like, entailed, right? But exactly, that point's not relevant to the
Mhm.
conversation. It's because the actual argument.
Yes,
I'm
they're
making
saying that
wasn't
like it is not relevant in the sense where it grants you like the contents of moral concepts or the moral facts, like what specific
Yeah.
details are relevant in the moral domain and how we actually
the
determine
fact that
something being
bananas
moral.
exist.
Look, before we
the
move
fact
on,
that
I
bananas
just
exist does not establish the truth of the proposition that lying is bad.
look, Divinity,
Okay,
right?
I'm just gonna step out of the conversation.
That's fair. Divinity, right? Like if you just said that, did I hear you correctly here? Just correct me if I didn't hear you correctly. Did you actually say the entailments of the proposition are not relevant?
I'm telling you that bananas in their existence. Okay, those things, the existence of bananas is not relevant to the discussion of moral discourse.
Yeah, that's not what I just asked you.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So
That's
I don't
great. Can you
understand
say an
whether or not-
answer?
That's my statement I've been making. Okay, you can try.
That's
to
great.
square
You
what
can
I
keep
just
repeating
said.
your same statement over and over.
Yeah,
But
I
please
know.
answer my question.
I don't know. Unless your statement or your question, sorry, unless your question is trying to capture the thing that I just said, then it's not relevant.
It's not. This is so. You got to be trolling. I'm asking you if you think
It's obviously
that
not
it's the case. Do you think that it's the case that entailments of a proposition are not relevant to whether or not the proposition's true?
relevant in the sense that it might contradicts like some other kind of competing theory you think is true, then of course those things are relevant. But simply because something is an entailment of another view, and we're not trying to weigh it against other views or there's an alternative, it's just like an inference we made, then no, of course that isn't relevant to the establishing the truth of the view. No.
Obviously it is. Holy shit. The only thing relevant to establishing the truth of the fucking view are going to be things entailed by or expected on the view.
Again, I already told you the context in which the entailment.
Let's go with an
play a
example
role.
hypothesis to not get
Since I
confused,
already
right?
told you. No, stop trying to stop. Like, I've already told you a way in which entailments are relevant to establishing the truth of a view. obviously, right? But we're talking about when you form a view, right? When you form a belief, is the belief forming method being objective here? And of course, bananas are facts, and bananas do exist, but the fact that bananas exist isn't relevant to establishing the truth of a moral theory. Okay, and in that
Yeah,
sense,
that's you
maybe
saying the
you
thing.
are.
That's you saying a thing you've already said again.
So Seth, I'm just gonna. I don't even want. This is so stupid. Like, do you think that the existence of bananas are relevant to the truth of like a
Have you
moral
been
theory?
listening to anything I'm saying? I'm telling you that in one sense
Do you
they're
think it's
relevant,
relevant?
and in the sense that you are talking about, I have no idea what the fuck you mean.
Look, so okay, so you think that in the senses that you do understand, you think that it's relevant.
In some senses, I understand yes, and in some that I understand no. It depends on which sense you're using it to mean. If you're using it to mean something that's expected on the hypothesis, then yes, they are going to be relevant in that sense. If it's the kind of thing where you're using it to say, excuse me, if you're using it to say something like it's expected on the hypothesis past some threshold, right, some specific threshold, then the answer is it depends what the threshold is.
Like if you have some list of usages in your head, I don't know why you're acting as if it's like insane to say that
because yours is none of them.
Is not relevant. Look,
yours is with an objective threshold, that nobody knows other than you, and you can't even describe how to define.
That's not true. That's not true either. I've described how you could describe whether or not somebody is objective or not.
No, you've described over and over again a bunch of weird, vague things. They all include your threshold, and I'm asking you over and over again, do you have a way of like figuring out what the threshold is? Even if you don't know what the if you don't know where exactly the threshold lies, how do I get the intuition for it? How do you figure it out? How did you figure it out? Did you figure it out?
I've kind of already explained the process which I go through as to understanding why using evidence and reasoning and logic and
that's not what I asked.
Those things. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Not what I asked.
I'm trying to explain something. I've kind of approached the conversation at a point now where like just because you ask something doesn't necessarily demand an answer because you're kind of deviating.
You haven't answered shit.
I've answered a lot of your questions actually, but
no, you've dodged a lot of my questions.
Maybe I have dodged a lot of your questions, but the reason that
Space Booties, name one question I've dodged. Post in the chat.
The reason why I've dodged a lot of your questions is because I don't think your questions are relevant to the point I'm making, and I explain why I don't think they're relevant and why I don't.
Dog, I don't even know what the fuck you mean when you say relevant yet, because you're using some weird proprietary stuff that nobody else does. It's insane.
If you don't get it, I think. Well, you usually try to make this claim that nobody else understands it, but I think I think.
I don't even think you understand
what I mean.
I don't think you understand.
Okay, maybe you don't think that. I think it's kind of obvious to people watching this that I do understand it, and I'm not using it in some weird idiosyncratic way.
So true, so true. But can you just really quickly address the question that I asked, or tell me why that question specifically isn't relevant?
I've kind of already addressed this multiple times, dude.
Do you remember what the question was?
It was in what way? What's the threshold, the arbitrary threshold? What's the method I could give you so you can get the intuition as to how I'm using the word relevant?
Yeah, and what's the reason why that's not relevant?
I've already explained this to you, dude.
No, you haven't.
I have actually already.
Why is it not relevant?
All right, look, I'm sure monkeyboy's recording. You can just rewatch it and look at my answer I gave.
Really, just repeat your answer. If you gave an answer, what was it?
Because I no longer find the conversation to be productive. So like we're either gonna go in a circle, which I don't want to do. I'm hungry. I want to eat. Or
all you've done is go in a circle. You repeated the same claim over and over again. I've told you why it's wrong over and over again. You've ignored the reason why it's wrong over and over again. You didn't give a fuck about the substance.
I was here. I was here in the debate. That didn't happen. What happened was that.
That's so true. That's so true. You can say over and over again it didn't happen, but I'm asking you very clearly and directly, what is the reason why that question is not relevant?
I've already explained this.
Obviously, the question is relevant to any sane person listening to this conversation. It's directly fucking relevant. That's the reason you don't have an answer. It's obviously relevant. If the contention is, I think it's the case that the language you use is not the kind of thing that's very communicative. That was my entire critique from the get-go, and you can't even address how you figure out what that threshold is. But you insist that threshold is non-arbitrary. It's not based on like our own preferences or just our own feelings, or it's not just something we set as some random thing somewhere.
I've already explained this to you. It's a misrepresentation.
No, you haven't.
If you're being objective in the conversation, your kind of dialectical approach would be adhered around understanding the view and looking at the arguments and the evidence. But instead, something that I think is kind of obvious is that you have this rhetoric agenda and that you'll kind of derail the substantive aspects to get a sound clip.
Dog, you are currently derailing the substantive aspects to talk about rhetoric.
That is dumb as fuck.
No,
Space Booties, you are the dumbest person in this room.
I've kind of already explained to you why I make these rhetoric points, is because again the conversation's not going anywhere. So I'm backing out. Like there's no point. Like I've already had the conversation with you.
Yeah, you gave no answers.
I've given you lots of answers, dude.
No, you haven't. Every single time. There are points where I was charitable enough to like not press you on dodging the fucking question, but there's not a single fucking question that I can remember you actually giving me a real answer to, other than that one question you gave me a real fucking answer to. What was my question just now? And then you refused to fucking answer it.
whether or not you remember me giving you answers. I did give you answers, and Monkey Boy has the clip. You can just watch the clip.
Dog, you can keep appealing to the clip or something. That's fine, but you know damn well you
I'm not
didn't.
appealing to that clip, but you can watch the video. I did.
I promise you.
On
you
what
do
planet
not
are you
want
not
to
appealing?
Watch the clip that you're
Space
involved in.
Booties. Look, Space Booties, right? Since you keep jumping in, you can tell me what question have I dodged?
Every single fucking
Name one.
Every
Name one.
single fucking one.
Name one specific example.
Every single one.
You don't have a specific example. 'cause
You
we're
don't
tracking,
have a
disagree with them.
specific one that
You disagree with his
can-
political
you
view.
can provide.
Lots of meat products, right?
Any examples?